I know mental health has been a prominent issue for many World Trade Center responders, and typically depression, PTSD, it's sometimes associated substance abuse. What form do they take? What can we do for them?
Well, first off, I think the firefighters and EMS workers are resilient. I think they are battle tested. I think that you have to separate out PTSD in terms of this being a unique exposure, a very different exposure than typical firefighting. For the first part, it was just massive.
Right, sure.
It was massive.
Right.
For the second, it was an attack. They're not used to being in an attack on them. And that raises the critical third part, which is they're not just responding to civilians in need. They're responding and then dying, with 343 of their own co-workers dying, with 10 months of trying to find their bodies as well as others. So this was very, very different than normal firefighting or normal EMS activities. So the firefighters that lost their friends, that came in contact with body parts that, for all we know, in their mind was their friends, higher percentage of PTSD. And the depression rates that we now see, which have become, to us, even more important than PTSD 15 years later, they're so comorbid with depression, with PTSD, that you can see the influence of the exposure on that. You can see the influence of the physical disabilities that have occurred since then. So it's very much different than their normal activity. How are they coping with this now? Well, for firefighters and EMS workers, we have free medications, we have free counseling, we have counseling as individual sessions, we have counseling in group sessions. To date, it seems that they mostly prefer the counseling to the medication. We'll see how that changes over time, whether it will or will not. As this disease transitions more and more into depression, there's more evidence that the medications may be of value, but we'll see what their preferences are and what they need.
I know there's no way to prepare people for an event like September 11th, but is there a way of training people, putting them through some sort of experiences early in their career, not artificially stressful experiences, but learning ways of coping with stressful events? Because firefighting, EMT, these are predictably stressful occupations. Is there some way of kind of increasing their resiliency?
Well, we're learning from the military how to do that. We have actually a cooperative relationship with the U.S. Army now, where we're trying to put into our cadet and our candidate and our continuing education programs part of their resilience training. Whether it will work or not, I don't know, because it seems, as I said for this event, that it's really the unusual activities that trigger this rather than the usual. But the more resilience that we can add to our workforce, certainly the better it's going to be.
After September 11th, the organization really had to undergo transformation to do what you needed to do. How did you do that?
In the 1970s, there was a telephone fire in Manhattan with a tremendous exposure to PCBs, dioxins, PVCs. Interestingly enough, every firefighter practically in the world knows about this fire. All right? I've been to meetings, symposium at the International Association of Firefighters Health Symposium. Everybody knows this. New Zealand, Australia firefighters, they know about the New York City telephone fire. They know, without any evidence, that nearly everybody died from cancers. Right? So if you never study something, if you never provide treatment, everybody dies from it. So we were able to tell people, it can't possibly be bad as that. Right? What are you scared of? People are going to be affected by this exposure, and we should be able to know what that effect really is, and then try to modulate it by treating it. Because if we don't do that, it'll just be assumed that everybody died from it. I was at 9/11 during the collapse, and you just got the sense, I got the sense, that if I was to die, that I would not have been able to help anyone. When you live through something like that, what you want to do is you want to seize that window and help.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What the fire department does, forget about the World Trade Center Health Program for a moment.
Right.
When we have somebody who comes down with cancer, and they are a firefighter or an EMS worker, the fire department voluntarily, retirees and other workers, they take that patient to their chemotherapy sessions.
Mm-hmm.
They drive them every time. They wait for them. If that guy or gal is vomiting from chemotherapy, they're there holding his hand. If the family members are able to come, which we of course encourage, we take them too. We drive them back. We reduce the barriers
Mm-hmm.
to care. The World Trade Center Health Program does that, huge, but the fire department does it as well. Labor does it, management does it. That's the opportunity here, to take those resources and shape them in a direction that can really make a difference.
So going forward, because you're monitoring this population, you're confident that if a new disease, or it's more likely to be an old disease that occurs at increased rates in the future, you're well placed to detect that?
We are. Will we detect everything? No, we're
Right, sure.
human. But so far we have, and we'll view it as a failure if we don't.